Okay. Okay, I'm going to start. I'm going to look to the audience. Can you nod if you can hear me? Fantastic. Anybody who isn't wearing their headset, please put your headset on. This is the silent disco, so everybody up. Start dancing. This is the first time I'm on this stage today, so it feels like we have a lot going on here. So hopefully this will all work smoothly. When we come to the Q&A section, we should be able to hear. There'll be roving mics coming around, and we should be able to hear your questions through the headset. So just to say welcome to the first panel session of the afternoon. We will be following the same format. If you've been watching the sessions up until now, we'll be following the same format that I've followed in all of the sessions until now, in that I'll do a quick introduction to our topic. I will quickly introduce our four fantastic speakers who we have here. We'll have a little bit of a conversation. I've got one or two questions for our panel, but then I'm going to come over to you in the audience. So very much the last half of this session, I want to be bringing you in and make sure this is a conversation with all of you. Before I do any of that, you may have noticed we have four fantastic men with us here today. We haven't got many sessions in which I'm the only lady and the rest are men. They are brilliant men, and I am not saying anything against these men here. We did try to get some women who are experts in procurement up on the panel as well. So for next time, women in the audience, if you would like to be sitting here, we would love to have you here. But it does mean that when I come to the questions, maybe for the first question, I will be looking to a woman in the audience to make sure we get a bit of balance as well in our conversation. So on that note, in terms of the topic that we are covering today, getting procurement right, making the right decisions on procurement. So really important, because procurement is one of the main ways that government can actually bring in new technologies and so help with that new approach to the way government and the public sector work. So we're going to be discussing all things to do with procurement, those decisions that you make, how you drive policy outcomes across government through some of those procurement decisions as well, and also maybe how we procure innovation itself, which might be an interesting conversation to follow. In terms of our four speakers, we have Dr. Ian Brotherston, who is Interim Deputy Director at the Innovation Funding in Innovate UK. We've got Dag Strømsnes, who is Division Director at the Norwegian Agency for Public and Financial Management. So great again to have the international aspect. And on that note, we also have Martin Ledolta, who is Managing Director at the Federal Procurement Agency in Austria. And then last but by no means least, we've got Rikesh Shah, who is Head of the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre at the Connected Places Catapult, one of our partners here today. So great to have all of you with us today. And I think because we do have people from different countries, and because maybe people aren't as kind of aware of what you all do in your different roles, there are some different organisations we're maybe not that familiar with. My first question here really is a slightly more general one, is could you tell us a little bit about kind of yourself, your organisation, and what your current role and key responsibilities are? Ian, I'll come to you first.
Hi, thanks, Siobhan. Yes, my name's Ian Brotherston. I work for Innovate UK. Innovate UK is the UK government's innovation agency. We support innovative businesses of all sizes across all sectors. We're part of UK Research and Innovation, which is a £9 billion per annum organisation, giving the grants to universities and various support to businesses. My particular role as Interim Deputy Director of Innovation Funding is looking after a number of those funding programmes. So a portfolio of roughly £150 million a year and about 1,000 projects in my area. And one of the things that I specifically have been involved with for many years now is actually the procurement of innovation and how we can use the procurement process to get more innovation into the public sector.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ian. Doug, same question to you.
Yeah. My role is being the Chief Procurement Officer for the government in Norway. And we have the responsibility for all the aspects of procurement in Norway. We are a combination of the Cabinet Office related to the policy issues, but we have the same role as the Crown Commercial Services here in the UK in relation to the more operational implementing side of procurement.
Fantastic. So you're in charge of the whole,
Yes.
the whole thing. Thank you. Martin, is that the same for you? Is it a similar role?
Pretty much, Siobhan, but let me start with an apology. I certainly am not as brilliant as you made me sound like, but still, I'll take it as a compliment. What I do, I am the managing director of Austria's Federal Procurement Agency, in short, BBG. And what makes us special, I reckon, is that when we were founded under the BBG Act some 24 years ago, we were meant to solely service federal entities, federal authorities, organizations, and that changed dramatically in 2006 when the BBG Act was amended in a way that now allows us to provide services for any public authority, organization, and that also means that when we started out as a BBG, we served a handful of organizations. Now it's over 3,000 organizations nationwide that we service and we provide services for.
Fantastic. So your role has just got bigger and bigger.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, since then. Brilliant. Thank you. And then Rakesh, tell us a little bit about your organisation and what you do.
Sure. So the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre is funded by government through Innovate UK, and fundamentally it's there to empower public agencies to think about the diverse supply chain that's out there, whether it's a startup, a scale-up, or even a large corporate. And how do we achieve public policy outcomes better, cheaper, quicker? Because quite often there is a challenge when it comes to public procurement that we're not perhaps maximising value through innovation. So that's why we've been set up. I've worked there on a part-time basis. I also lecture at a series of universities. Previously, I was the head of innovation at Transport for London. I was there for 22 years. So I try to apply innovative thinking and market innovation to solve some of London's key challenges.
Fantastic. So you've got lots of experience that you can draw on from different parts of the public sector and academia. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Ian, I'm going to come back to you. So now we've set the scene. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the latest things that are happening on procurement in the UK? Because I know the landscape is changing a little bit and there's been some new announcements.
Yeah, thank you, Siobhan. I'm not sure how many in the audience will know, but the new Procurement Act went live about 6 weeks ago in the UK, obviously replacing legacy EU procurement policy. I spent a lot of time working with Cabinet Office colleagues on this to make sure that it was more innovation friendly. Some of the key pieces of it are re-emphasis on using pre-market engagement to understand what the market can supply. There was also a couple of years ago something called the Innovation Ambition that Cabinet Office published as part of the Public Procurement Act, because they were also really keen to see more innovative solutions procured across the public sector, whether it's central government, whether it's local government and elsewhere. So that's obviously been the current topic. Allied to that, of course, we have got the UK government missions, the 5 missions. Now, Innovate UK and UKI are working with across government again on what are the challenges, particularly around research and for those missions, but also what innovation is required to help deliver those missions. And as part of that, Cabinet Office and DSIT has set up a new joint unit called the Commercial Innovation Hub. Kate Greenbank from Cabinet Office was here earlier today, who's part of that setup. And they're working across government, and DSIT have set out a fantastic document trying to get departments and the SROs for the missions to write down what their challenges are, truly what their challenges are, not just what they want to deliver, but what's a good challenge statement. So hopefully that will help us both deliver those missions, whether it's through procurement of innovation, whether that's what's known as public procurement innovation, the government being an early adopter, or whether that's what I've been involved in Innovate UK, which is pre-commercial procurement, which the new Procurement Act has basically brought inside the regulations. When we were under the EU regulations, pre-commercial procurement sat outside the regulations, and it often meant procurement professionals didn't actually fully use the power of procurement to stimulate innovation.
Thanks, Ian. I'm just curious, because Rakesh, I know you wanted to come in, I think, on the new landscape, but can you put your hand up in the audience? Are you in the procurement profession? If you are, can you put your hand up? So that's really interesting and really good to see, actually, that we've got people here who aren't necessarily in the procurement profession, but want to understand about innovation in procurement, because it's such an important area that I think gets overlooked quite a lot, but it's so much of government spend and drives a lot of what we do. Fantastic. Rakesh, did you want to come in on that new landscape?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ian said. And I think going back to my old role at Transport for London, running the innovation function there, initially there was a bit of a tension with the procurement team, because the procurement team said, you're taking us into risky territory where we're buying stuff that we don't really know how we compare with other things that we might be bringing in. And what we found towards the end is, as long as we were open, transparent, and consistent with the procurement team, actually we're able to do stuff. And I think with the new Procurement Act, there's a couple of points. I think firstly, procurement has to be a strategic tool for an organisation. It can't just be, let's run a process and we'll be okay. And that means that we need to challenge the chief procurement officer, we need to challenge the service owners, and we need to challenge the leadership team to say, how do we get best value, not just cost, but overall value. And I think, just building on what Ian has said, I think pre-market engagement's critical, because the rate that technology is changing and the rate that different types of suppliers are coming in, we've got to be at the forefront of that, rather than sometimes the big tech companies selling to us and then we're buying something that we're not 100% sure what we're buying, if I'm being honest. And I think 2 or 3 practical things that have come through in the new Act. One is a competitive flexible procedure, which allows us to experiment and iterate along the way and hopefully scale, rather than in particular startups running nice proof of concepts and then you have to run another procurement process. So here, whether you're large or small, you can iterate and hopefully scale. And I think the other area that I'm really interested in is the transparency, which is we have to publish our pipelines much earlier if you're a certain size business, which means the market can get ready through pre-market engagement and the pipeline publications much earlier, which means that we can shape markets through the public sector budgets rather than acting slightly tactical.
Thanks. Before I come on to Dag and Martin to ask them about what's going on strategically then with procurement, I've got another question for the audience. So if you're not a procurement professional, how many people in this audience are potential suppliers or partners to government? I wish I could do a questionnaire now on where you all sit in government. So very interesting. So Dag and Martin, so Rakesh was saying there about using procurement as a strategic tool. To what extent in Norway, for example, Dag, do you use procurement to help meet some of your government's strategic objectives?
In Norway, we really welcome the discussions generated from the Draghi Letta report. What makes us worry, like the rest of Europe, is the European Court of Auditors report, telling us that there's a very lack of competition, too few bidders.
Right.
In each competition. So we really need to increase the competitiveness to really take out the potential with innovation. In Norway, we are very much aware that innovation support all the overall targets with the procurement, included better value for money, cost savings, higher quality of the services, and it's also more strategic target related to sustainability and our struggle to reach the Paris targets that I think we all are struggling with. We also need to work very hard with the further business development, and especially in relation to the green solutions that we are challenging the suppliers to develop the green, so the whole of the society could benefit from that. And I think these issues are now urgent in Norway, and I think it's a growing understanding that we need to think after the oil, because Norway is a very rich country with huge oil income from the Northern Sea, but we need to have more to build on after the oil economy. And I think politicians from both sides of the aisle agree about this. So I think we will have a huge and better and deeper mandate for working with innovation in public procurement.
Yeah, really interesting, because for Norway that is such a massive transformation and a huge pivot to a greener kind of energy future. Really interesting. And I wonder if the issue of too few bidders is connected in some way to how many things we put into the procurement exercise, and maybe that is a kind of barrier to some people. So, Martin, I'm going to come on to you. In Austria, to what extent do you also use procurement to help drive some of your strategic objectives?
Well, as a matter of fact, the Austrian government is trying to do what Rakesh summarized in his opening statement, namely to maximize procurement through innovation. And over the years, the Austrian government has devised a couple of strategies that now fall into place. The BBJ Act, for example, requires us specifically to stimulate the market for small and medium-sized enterprises, the so-called backbone of Austria's economy. And currently, roughly 76% of all tenders are allocated to SMEs, and that's a fantastic number. Also, and pertaining to innovation, some 10 years ago, Austria devised strategies on both innovation and sustainability, both again pertaining to procurement. And some 10 years ago, the Austrian government established 2 national competence centers, a sustainability competence center and a competence center promoting innovation. And we are mandated to not only run these competences, but also implement the strategies. And again, if you don't only have the large national buyers, the large national authorities, such as, say, the Ministry of Interior or Defense, but also small municipalities, you can really, top-down implement these strategies. And we've been very successful in doing so over the past, now almost 15 years.
Thanks. And so going back to Rakesh then, this idea of innovation and using procurement to kind of help innovation and the other way around as well. As you've sat in kind of local government in London, who does it better? Like, is the central government, are we behind a little bit in the central government? Like, who's showing more innovation when it comes to procurement?
Yeah, I think colleagues here are a great example. There's lots of good practice, and I think you do need these competence centres, somewhere we can actually do it safely, slightly outside, but it's still relevant to the inside. And just to play some numbers back here, we spend 400 billion a year on public procurement in the UK, and across the EU, I think it's about 2 trillion. So the money is significant. And when I look at some of the stats, when we ran a research piece recently with local government agencies.
One sec, Rakesh. Maria, have we got another headset? This one's stopped working. Thanks. You can carry on, Rakesh.
Yeah. So we ran a piece of research recently interviewing local public sector officials. And what we found is only 14% said innovation through procurement could be used as a tool. So using procurement to bring in innovation. Yeah. And we also looked at some tussle data. And I think there was a scenario between 23 and 24 where we looked at certain types of contract value and 20% only received a single bidder. So it's quite hard at the moment to bring innovation in from the market. And I think the level of challenges that we have, which has been articulated by the panelists, whether it's the climate emergency, health, crime, education, the list goes on. Whether we're spending 400 billion a year or 2 trillion a year, we are desperate. And if I go back to my London days, we had 10,000 people a year dying from respiratory diseases in the city, 92 road collisions that resulted in fatality and thousands of serious injuries, and the list went on. So that meant we were desperate. And that, I think there is an opportunity in parallel where we are seeing barriers to entry for different types of suppliers coming in reduce. And we're seeing more, broadly as a result of advances in technology. And that means that how do we better access, with advances in technology, whether it's robotics, new materials, quantum, data, how do we better access those suppliers? And I think that's the challenge that I set internally within TfL, which is the hypothesis is we don't have to do everything ourselves. Because far too often the public sector, when it's panicking, it will go internal and say we don't need to share our problem statements with the market because we need to solve this because we've committed to a politician. And I think the challenge there for us is to be more vulnerable, to do pre-market engagement, to see what's out there. And then I think once we do that, to really see the different types of suppliers, market sounding, market scouting, experimentation, but baking procurement right at the beginning. And then out of the 20 things that you do, probably 18 will fail. But the 20 that succeed will create maximum value. And it's how do we create that culture of entrepreneurship, and failing is fine, and you create that risk of...
all the things that we've talked about in the other sessions as well.
And that creates value.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what we should be measured on.
Nice. I'm going to come to the audience in a minute, but I've just got one more question that I'm going to put to all of you. So we've talked about technology, talked about innovation. Will things like AI, because that's come up in every conversation that we've had so far, will AI make it better for small medium enterprises, for example, to access government contracts? And are we using AI to make the process easier for ourselves, but also for potential suppliers? So what extent is AI changing the procurement landscape? Ian, I'll come to you.
One of the things that a Cabinet Officer worked hard on during the new Act and its implementation is actually make things easier for SMEs anyway, with the single sign-on, more transparency, etc. And that's not necessarily reliant on AI. What I have seen when I've been at procurement conferences is a lot of suppliers not just selling AI solutions to let's say Ministry of Defence or DFT, whoever it is, but selling AI solutions to procurers to help them better gather data, to help them better trawl through the tenders. And I think that's where it will come in quite a lot initially, is actually within the processing of the tenders themselves. It should help that pre-market engagement as well, which is vital as we move forward and try and use procurement more strategically.
Thanks. Doug?
I think AI affects us in three ways. First, how are we going to procure AI solutions? That is maybe the most simple one. Secondly, we need to do analysis of all the procurement data. And in Norway, AI has helped us a lot in that analysis. And third, how does it affect the procurement process, both from the supplier side, but also from the contracting side? And I think it's a bit early to say, but we are now following a very interesting working group in OECD with AI experts on procurement from all different countries that now are looking forward, collecting experiences and how to take this forward.
Okay.
But I'm definitely sure that it will help for both contracting authorities and supplier. And the lack of resources among the SMEs and the startups, it could really be helpful.
Yeah, thanks. Martin, in Austria.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. There's obviously no way around AI, but I think it's paramount that we utilize AI to provide simple answers for difficult questions. Engage more bidders. Use AI and use data to engage public entities early and encourage them to, think of challenges ahead, rethink their status quo. Use AI to establish models that might be relevant in the years to come. And that is exactly what our Competence Center on promoting innovation is currently doing.
Brilliant, thank you. So use it to get ahead and
Precisely.
do all that looking ahead. Rakesh, your thoughts on AI and procurement?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think one fundamental question is, what do we mean by AI? Because I think lots of people have their own definition. So I think we do need to define it in our respective organizations, our respective cities and countries. And I think there's four quick things, and it'll repeat what others have said. I think one is, have we got the right capability and skills to manage data and actually make decisions? I certainly agree. I think the amount of data that's going around in an organization, we can make much better procurement decisions. So I think that's the other one. I think the third area is the procurement process, both in terms of the supply side and on the buyer side, which actually when you're applying, are you just using tools that are already out there to put a better bid together? And the fourth area is, there are some brilliant solutions out there. But going back to my first point, at Transport for London, we're thinking about AI in the 1950s. We've had driverless trains for ages. The DLR, that would have come here. So again, what do we mean by AI? If we can't define it, it just becomes a word like innovation or another word.
Used for everything. Brilliant, thanks, Rakesh. Okay, coming over to the audience, I'm going to make sure I stand up because I can't see everybody here. Who's got the first question? Anything to do? Yes, we've got a gentleman down there, and then we have, but I'm also looking for a lady, don't forget. So we've got two gentlemen, and if you want to keep your hand up, we'll get the microphone down here. Have we got a second microphone? Down here? And then we need a lady after this, thank you. So, gentleman at the back.
Yeah, afraid I'm not a lady, but still got a question. Probably to Martin. So Austria's obviously got a federal system. How does the federal government and the cantons work on procurement? Is there innovation in procurement at the canton level, which is learnt on by other cantons and by the federal government? So how does that interaction work?
Truth be told, there's little interaction. Again, as I have said earlier, we provide these framework agreements for both the federal level and provinces and municipalities alike. When we try to assert the demand, we try to compare the smaller canton levels to those of larger federal ministries. It's difficult to do so. Most of the time. COVID, for example, has changed that narrative because we saw that the cantons and the federal institutions alike had the same demand, and those were obviously vaccinations, vaccination logistics, all kind of health accessories, and smaller cantons that have never worked with us not only saw the credibility that we were able to showcase, but they also noticed that they were simply underwater. They could not procure what they needed the most and what they needed so desperately for their citizens to survive. And that is when they turned to us. And for us, it's been fantastic. To give you a brief example, prior to COVID, roughly 70% of spending under our contracts could be allocated to federal entities. Now it's almost vice versa. 60% of spending under our contracts can be allocated to municipalities, to provinces, and basically to organizations that may use our services, but not have to use our services. And I reckon, particularly when I see the potential in public procurement, that the number of percentage will increase in the years to come, and I estimate by 2030 that 80% of spending on our contracts can be allocated to those who may use us, but those who must not make use of us. So obviously, it's demand driven, and we try to make assertions when it comes to both demand and supply, but it is still difficult on a federal level to really compare those institutions with each other.
Thanks. Ian, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, something I'd add to that, having been involved in some of the training that Cabinet Office gave across the public sector, both central government, local government and elsewhere, and sat through some of the early training sessions because we added some material about how to use the competitive flexible procedure. And it was fascinating that there were some of the chief procurement officers of big local government organisations who could not wait for the Act to go live so they could truly use the competitive flexible procedure and tried some innovation within how they procured, and procuring innovation. But equally, at the other end of the spectrum, there were literally very senior people from very senior parts of the public sector going, what's happening to my framework? That's all they were worried about. Could they keep using the same old framework they'd always used? So it does come always down to the individuals, but it also comes down, I'm not sure it's Rakesh or someone else said earlier, about top-down ambition about how you're going to use procurement, what you want to use procurement for. Are you using it just to keep the lights on, or are you going to try and do it to really improve your services and deliver policy?
Thanks.
And it's also one of the reasons why I support the work of IPEC so much, which is their main thing for me is upskilling those parts of the public sector that don't think that way.
So we've got a gentleman there, then I've got a lady here, and then two more women on the front row, and then I'll come to some others. So gentleman there.
Yeah, hi, my name's Ethan. I work in HM Land Registry as a resource planning lead. I found myself more recently getting involved in, not doing it myself, but involved in the procurement process, looking at contact centre technology more specifically, but thinking about innovation and procurement. One of the things I heard earlier that I thought was really interesting was about considering not building the legacy of tomorrow, and also thinking ahead for how can we future-proof this system. So I think all of that is great, and the focus on us getting that future bigger thinking system correct and procurement correct. But in the interim, we often find ourselves tied into multiple year contracts and different systems that might be expiring at different dates. So what could our focus be, and what could we look at in the sort of interim when we find ourselves in that position where we can't look at that single big solution, but we might need to be making smaller incremental changes or consideration?
This is a great question. So just for those, because I'm not sure if everyone heard it, but how do we make sure that as we're procuring for the future, we don't necessarily, in the world that's changing so fast, technology is changing fast, don't tie ourselves down into very long contracts that we can't tweak along the way as we need to. So everybody wants to come in. I think Rakesh, then Ian, and I'll come to Doug and Martin.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think three things. I think the first one is, by the time we go live, we might already be out of date because it could take a year or two to just go live. So how do we firstly forecast for that to say what does day one look like? I think the second point is, let me give you a practical example, lampposts. Lampposts have been pretty much the same for many years, and I was procuring them. And then once you run out of the lamp, you want to re-procure, you procure in 25 years. But if we think about the role of the lamppost now, it might become an electric vehicle charge point, it will give light, it might become an air quality sensor, and in the next few years, it might also talk to vehicles, as you've got connected autonomous vehicles. So you don't want to re-procure 4 times. So how can you be more modular in terms of the things that you're designing? And I think the third point is, as a result, how do you create contracts? So we used to put innovation schedules into our contracts. So you've got a long-term big contract, but then within that, if things change, the environment changes, how can you bring in test, potentially scale new things, rather than having to constantly re-procure? But that requires a massive mindset shift in your organization, both from the commercial team, the operational team, and anyone else that's involved in that process.
I've got Doug, then Ian.
I think it's very important to take into account that you could not have a very long-term contract if you are in a rapid changing market. So you need to take that into account, and I will encourage all public contractors to do market sounding, think of supplier development, build partnerships with the supplier association, to be aware and to have a readiness for this changing environment, so we could have good and high quality services and tools from the supplier side. So thinking about innovation, think about change and the rapid changing markets is important to take into account.
Ian, your thoughts on bringing agility, I guess, into the process?
Absolutely. And just very briefly, 2 points building on the others. Number one, it's actually one of the great uses of pre-market engagement is to understand how you're going to use that to influence the length of contract, what's in the contract. So take that information you're getting through pre-market engagement and build that into how you're at the end point you're delivering. Another key thing, this is interesting, we're discussing about SMEs, particularly getting more SMEs involved in procurement. And we've done a lot of good work at the front end of procurement to make it more SME friendly. We haven't actually spent a lot of time thinking about the contracts, which aren't always SME friendly. So really don't just do standard SLAs. Think about the SLA for the particular procurement you're doing.
Thanks. Martin, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Well, I really do like what you said. Public procurement needs to be more agile, flexible, and creative. We are a limited liability company, and that helps us tremendously because we can make mistakes. A government, a ministry must not make any mistakes. We are more flexible. We can think creatively. We can take risks that normally a government would not be willing to take. We are much faster. We are not burdened by bureaucracy. And when it comes to time to market, and I look at other central purchasing bodies, we are much faster, and that is a good thing. It really is a good thing. And the future is, in my opinion, all about modularization, just what Rakesh said, and not standardization. We need to be flexible. We need to look into how we can fulfill the very needs of our customers. And that will require different approaches in the years to come. It will mean that, providing concretizations of framework agreements, for one company, specifying and modifying, certain goods, certain products under contract, provide mini tenders within framework agreements. Just be more flexible, be more creative, and always bear in mind what the customer needs.
Yeah.
Just on that one other point is around open source. What I am concerned about is vendor lock-in for many, many years. Whereas what should be open source as a contracting authority, so other people get a chance to compete. Otherwise, you start getting vendor locked in, and it's really hard for you to move on.
Thanks. Okay, we've got a question here, and then if you could well, I don't know where the microphone is. Have you got the microphone? So, lady there in the white jacket, but question here, yeah. That's it, yep.
Dana from Ministry of Justice Innovation Fund. A question about risk aversion. Do you have any tips or words of wisdom around mitigating risk aversion, especially around failure, especially early stage failure, piloting of innovative ideas or prototyping when procuring those? And I'm referring both to perhaps risk aversion of the civil servants, of procurement officials, but also of the wider public. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Thank you. So great. So not only do we need procurement professionals to be more agile, entrepreneurial, but also, take a few more managed risks. Yeah, Dag, and then Ian.
In Norway, there are many procurement authorities that are measured of not doing mistakes, and then you are very afraid of doing any mistake. So I think that relates to the innovation culture, and that, as it was said earlier this morning, if you're going to innovate, you're going to be proactive, you will actually need to do some failure now and then. So the organization must adapt and accept failure. So I think the innovation culture is the key answer to that space, based on the Norwegian experiences.
And this came up a lot in the earlier sessions around leadership and leaders giving that permission to try things and fail. Ian?
Absolutely. So I'm going to take a slightly different tact on that because I agree. But the other thing that people who know me will be bored of hearing me saying is also, though, be prepared for success. One of the things that we see a lot is those small trials, and you might try 5, 10 different solutions, and you might decide that 1 or 2 of them work, you want to procure it, but the organisation isn't actually ready to procure. So it's done a lot of work, but it hasn't got the business cases built up for the next phase. It hasn't thought about how it integrates into the wider system it works in. It maybe hasn't thought about how it scales the solution. So you can also get failure by not being prepared for success.
Yeah, Rakesh, yeah.
I mean, my experience is, and I'll give you a couple of scenarios. I think one was I was just ducking and diving, giving my team air cover. And, think about a government role. There's a spreadsheet and you've got all your projects and you've got the red, amber, green status. And you're desperately trying to make sure everything's green as it goes upwards. Well, I used to say to my team, I want to see more reds. And it was a bizarre scenario because that means we failed. But actually, that's what you want when you're pushing boundaries. And then I used to say, don't worry as to how we report to the mayor, and everyone else will manage that. But I want you to push as far and wide as you can. And then I think that I was really lucky. I had a series of executive committee members who gave me air cover. And they said, your job is for every pound we invest, we want you to bring initially £3 back, and then afterwards £5 back. So that allowed me to fail. But then if you're failing, you've got to make sure you put the right safeguards in place. Because if it goes to the media, it goes to the politicians, how do you explain it? So you've got to always cover your back. You've got to cover your team's back, but at the same time, you've got to be able to experiment and try beyond the norm.
Try new things. Thanks. I'm conscious we've got about 10 minutes left, and I know we've got quite a few questions lined up. So, lady here at the front.
Hi, I'm Shamini Ghosh. I'm an executive coach from the Government Commercial Organisation. So we support our commercial professionals in their leadership capability. I'd love to hear from the panel any recent examples of how AI innovation has improved procurement. So anything that you've seen, you've talked about TPP, so we know that's bringing innovation. Anything else that you've seen that's optimised?
Concrete examples of AI improving procurement? Any examples?
I think I think the data is terrible. So you need good data to be able to interrogate and be able to create AI. Some of the responsive I had back is, do an FOI. I think we need to get the data right. We need to be absolutely clear on data labeling at source. And I think that will allow us to run larger algorithms and actually interrogate the data and make better decisions.
Anyone got any recent examples?
I'm going to be honest and say no. Seen lots of procurement of AI. Seen AI help procurement, not yet.
So there's a lot of potential there, maybe an area.
There are definitely vendors out there who have got AI solutions they will tell you will help procurement. I've not seen them uptaken. I'm sure they have been by parts of the public sector, but I've not I've personally not seen them used.
No. Oh, but I agree in what you said about data. There's a massive amount of data in the procurement process from all the e-procurement systems. So to help us to oversee, to see the strategies, to have the big picture of the processes, both in a single procurement organization or in the country, that has AI been very, very helpful. But we have not seen it in Norway in the procurement processes so far. But I'm thinking short
And to build on that answer, obviously the new Procurement Act only went live 6 weeks or so ago. And of course, everything is now published on the central, I can't remember if it's called Contracts Finder, or whatever it's now called. One of the things that people like Rakesh and I and our colleagues and their colleagues in Cabinet Office, that's going to be the best source of data. Currently, the data is everywhere. When we get more data coming through from the central Contracts Finder, we will be able to use that data combined with AI to work out much more about what should be procured, how things should be procured, what has been procured, etc. So I think we're not, in the UK, certainly the data issue, and it sounds like it's similar with our colleagues here, is probably the biggest thing to overcome.
And here's an offer for you. If we wanted to run a small proof of concept, I'm happy to bring my team in with Crown Commercial Services and see if we can better label data and perhaps use AI. So the offer's there.
Thanks. So we have question here, and there. We've got 3 questions. They're the last 3 questions we can fit in. So maybe if we take, very quickly.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Barry Hooper. I'm the former Chief Commercial Officer for the Ministry of Justice, and I'm currently leading the Intelligent Client function in the Cabinet Office on cross-government systems and data. The good news is we're pretty close to launching a cross-government digital and data strategy, which will answer some of the questions that people have got in the audience. But my question's for Martin. As part of your Austria 2050 digital plan, what are the 3 things that you've done commercially to support the execution of that?
Whew, that's a tough one.
And you've got about a minute to
Yeah.
answer that question.
Concrete answer would be, for example, to support the digitalization plans in terms of school needs equipment, university needs equipment. 3 years ago, we have had a large tender that allowed us for providing notebooks, for example, to all pupils, grade 6 to 10, 10 to 14. We are not in a position to provide contracts when it really comes to concrete services for our government to really allow them to reach that particular goal, I have to admit.
So maybe there's a conversation you two can have afterwards, follow up on that afterwards. Thanks. There was a lady here, just there, and then we'll come to you there. Thanks.
Ian talked about frameworks, so I was just curious, do Crown Commercial frameworks help innovators? Do they encourage them to onboard? We all know it's not very easy to get onto a framework. It's very safe to procure from them.
I'm laughing because it's a very active topic of conversation amongst my colleagues in the innovation community, in the procurement community. There are some places where frameworks make perfect sense. There are others where frameworks probably just aren't quick enough and agile enough. The scary thing was I did have a colleague who were nameless, who worked in central government in procurement, who said to me, can you really procure without using a framework? And I went, of course you can procure without using a framework. And I was stunned that that's so embedded, that way of thinking. In some areas, if you're basically building roads, frameworks often work. If you're buying food and drink, frameworks might work. If you're buying the AI solutions and things we're talking about today, frameworks can be a double-edged sword.
Doug, you wanted to come in on frameworks.
I think it's very important to build capacity and competence within the procurement organizations and to build the good frameworks. But I think you could not build just one framework. You need to approach different markets, you see, it's a very big difference to work with SMEs and startups versus the huge suppliers. It's very different to work with rapid changing technology versus infrastructures that is going to last for 50 years. So it is not one size fits all, but I think simplifications of the frameworks is very, very important.
Thanks. And then we probably do have time for this one final question.
Hi, I'm a commercial manager on HS2 project. We are implementing AI in our recently, actually, last month, for cost management and contract management, actually. One of the challenges that we face is budgeting. As an organization, we don't have sufficient budget for innovations. And I assume this is, talking to other colleagues with other sectors, it looks like a similar situation we have. So what's being done from the central government to encourage the government department and arm's length department like HS2 to put more funding aside for innovation? Because this sort of technology is expensive at the moment, but without, there is a lot of efficiency comes with it, but we need the funding. What's being done?
So that's a really good final question, I think. And HS2 obviously is not a project that hasn't had its challenges, but also I like the fact that you're talking about the post-contract, so using AI on the evaluation of the project as well. So your thoughts on funding for innovation?
Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to HS2, because HS2 have actually done quite a lot of procurement of innovation. You're talking about your thing, they've been one of the very few organisations to really procure the low carbon concrete in any kind of, and they actually spent quite a lot of their own money helping those organisations develop those low carbon concretes. So it can be done. Now, as long as I've been, the last 6, 7, 8 years, however long I've really been involved in procurement of innovation, a topic that goes round amongst colleagues in what is now DSIT, Cabinet Office and elsewhere is, should we set targets? There are some countries in Europe have targets. The US famously has targets for certain departments, depending on what budget it is. It is a controversial topic. I personally believe that we should set some targets, but in very specific ways, not flat, not all the same, etc. I don't know whether that will come round again. I don't know. I can't remember which particular. It was in the last government, but towards the end of the last government, one of the recommendations that what did get discussed was actually setting targets for the amount of procurement funding that was spent on innovation. It is a controversial topic, but as I say, we know countries, organisations do it, but you've got to think, if you're going to do it, you've really got to think about that carefully, though.
Rakesh wants to come in on this.
Yeah, I think, we had a similar experience with Crossrail when that came into London, and we got a lot of bad press, and I think HS2 is getting a lot of unfair bad press in my view. I think there is lots of good innovation going on, whether it's with startups, and I've seen some startups using a prime contractor to work through and scale. I also think you've got quite a lot of joint ventures, and I think my advice would be, how do you stimulate them to bring in more innovation? Because you've got long-term contracts there, i.e. all the JVs that you have across the system. How can you start setting some problem statements that you have now and in the future and use them as your contracting mechanism? And really quickly, just going back on frameworks, I was at a panel session with Minister Gould last week, and she asked the question, are frameworks good for innovation when it comes to startups? There were 400 people in the room and not one person put their hand up.
Okay. Martin, then Doug.
Sure, but I'm afraid my answer is not going to help anybody. I'm in the very pleasant position of, again, working for and managing a limited liability company, albeit a non-profit company. And even though we provide services to all federal institutions for no fee, for no cost, we provide services, goods, products for those, again, who may make use of our services for a small management fee, again, varying from procurement group to procurement group. And that allows us to have decent revenues, so to speak, and we can actually invest heavily in procurement, innovation. Again, we can invest heavily in these competence centers. We can invest heavily in challenges where we address companies, to, again, rethink their status quo in order to look ahead and to see what the future will hold for us.
Yeah, so it's a different funding model.
Exactly.
Doug, you've got 20 seconds left.
Yes. If you want to speed up innovative procurement, you should assist with finance. In Norway, the Innovation Agency has subsidized innovation partnerships, the procurement procedure from the European Union. I think it was with 100,000 pounds for each project to help with consultancy to help things going, and we see that this was really encouraging for the work. On the other hand, we had the startups, where we also had some additional funding of the projects and paying the startups up front instead of after contract, etc. So
Thank you.
this has really been helpful in Norway.
Thanks. And it was a great last question, because I think that question about funding innovation could cut across lots of professions, not just on the procurement. Thank you very much. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause to our great panel there. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for your questions. Just so you know, there's a 5-10 minute change around now to the next session. I will be in there doing how to rewire government for innovation and digital transformation. On the Accelerate stage, it is innovation in operational delivery. And stay here if you want to hear about leaders creating innovative culture, which came up as one of our questions. Thanks all of you. Enjoy your next session. Thank you so much, everybody.